All right, shall we? Sarah, why don't you lead us off?
So, Coach Lasso, you finally won your first match. How's it feel?
Well, Sarah, I believe you can outscore your opponent and still lose, just like you can score less than them and win. But last week, we definitely won, which is pretty darn fun. All right, next question.
Hello, and welcome to a special Patron episode of Biscuits with the Boss. What? That's right. We are doing a Ted Lasso podcast. This is going to show up on the Set Lusting Bruce feed. It's going to set up on the easy for me to say, Southgate Media feed. This is an excuse for me and a couple of my best friends to get together and talk about one of the best shows ever made. And this is two of the three of us, I think maybe all three, are huge Aaron Sorkin fans. And so we still give praise. I am Jesse Jackson, and joining me tonight is Thom Zahler and David Miller. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think we're all big Aaron Sorkin fans. And so so, you know, by far, Sports Night and West Wing and everything else he's done, I loved. But I just have this, I don't know why, but I just have this great affection for Ted Lasso.
Well, I mean, when I first watched Ted Lasso, I mean, if anyone asked me what my favorite TV show of all time is, it's The West Wing, period, end of story. That's mine. That is my answer always. But man, I watched that first season of Ted Lasso and it was, Ted Lasso is my favorite comedy of all time because it was real hard. It was real hard not to say that it's my favorite of all time. So I had to put that comedy caveat to it.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin is one of the ways Tom and I bonded. He was a guest at a comic book convention in New Orleans, and I was a attendee. And I went by his booth, and we ended up talking, you know, Sports Night and Aaron Sorkin, and just we bonded, and so that's it. So anyway, I'm excited. Why don't we start out? Tom, tell us, our listeners, a little bit about yourself and how you found the show.
Well, I am a comic book artist and writer. I do a comic called Love and Capes. Along the way, I've done stuff for Webtoon, like Warning Label and Cupid's Arrows. I've worked on the My Little Pony comic. I've written for the Spider-Man cartoon and for Saint Seiya. And I just draw and write for a living, which is especially interesting in these times. And that's kind of how I found the show. When I'm working, I listen to podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is this one called Upgrade with Jason Snell, where they talk about Apple stuff, because I'm an Apple nerd artist. I work with Apple stuff all the time. And they were talking about Ted Lasso being out, and there was no part of seeing a show based on an NBC commercial that made me say I needed to see it. And then I kept hearing how good it was, and I had some free time, and I decided to check it out. And then it was Katie bar the door, because I just didn't look back. I think I had waited till the entire season was done, and I consciously remember parsing the episodes out because I wound up liking them so much that I didn't want to binge it. I wanted to savor it.
You know, and you've had a history like of fish out of water, like, because wasn't there the Canadian Mountie show?
Due South,
yes. Yeah, Due South, that you were a big fan of. And so, David, how about you?
Mine is a little different. So I'm not a huge Jason Sudeikis fan, or certainly wasn't before this. He did a movie, We're the Millers, and his name was David Miller, and so people were like, "Oh, you must really love." No, I don't. I just wasn't a huge fan. I've seen a lot of his work, but just wouldn't have called myself a fan. And there happened to be there's a critic that I like, Drew McWeeny, and he was writing about Ted Lasso. And I just really had no interest, like Tom said, no real interest in a show about that came from a commercial. I remembered the commercials, and I thought, man, this is just going to suck. There is no way this is going to be any good. And I found myself one night, I was sitting at home. My wife was doing something in the dining room. I had nothing to do, and I was like, I just happened to turn on the TV. Apple Plus was on, and it was Ted Lasso. And I said, okay, I'm going to click it. I'm going to give this one episode a shot. And I turned it on, and within 5 minutes, something happened in the show, and I started laughing hysterically. And my wife stopped what she was doing and was like, "What are you doing?" And I kept rewinding this one scene over and over and over and watching it. And that's when I knew I was hooked. And that was, I think at that point, maybe 5 episodes were out. So I watched all 5 episodes that first evening and then started watching it each week.
Yeah, so I had similar thing. I had heard a lot of good things. I had bought Apple for All Mankind because I love Ron Moore, and the idea of this alternate timeline where Russia got to the moon first really fascinated me. And so I had not watched anything, but once again, critics kept saying this is great. Now I don't like sometimes TV shows that are where the main character is dumb. Like I'm not a fan of Anchorman. I'm not a fan of these kind of movies a lot. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be dumb. And so I start watching it and I go, wait a minute, he's pretty smart. I mean, he comes across as very discerning, and kind of very kind of just very not country, but very just simple and direct. But he's actually very smart. And I've often said that I would love to see the coach from Friday Night Lights and him at that would be, they're attending some kind of conference together and they end up having beers. So I did, because everything had done, this was on a Sunday, I started watching and I stayed up till like past midnight, even though it was a school night, because I just had to see the end of the series. Yep. Yeah. And so, we've talked about it. Then Linda watched it, and then Chris came and watched it. So, and the show, much like a lot of Aaron Sorkin work, it leads itself to rewatching it. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I rewatched it with my girlfriend because she was mad because apparently a British show about soccer was something I should have waited for. I didn't realize that. But when we did watch it, I was surprised at how much stuff is layered in and how much stuff just really pays off so well.
Yeah, it's things that happen in the first or second or third episode, then pay off in the 8th, 9th, and 10th episode, and it's so brilliant. And to Jesse's point, that's very much like a Sorkin thing right there, to put something in, or I guess half the time Sorkin probably never realized what he was doing, but he definitely laid those crumbs to come back and get it later. And that's, I feel like the writers for Ted Lasso, they know exactly what they're doing, they know exactly where they're going, and they don't. There's not a lot of throwaway. There's not a lot of filler. It's all really tightly contained, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, they're very disciplined.
Yeah, I do. In like, I guess I've seen a couple of interviews where Jason Sudeikis says, we have the high points, like we know, and then the writers' room fills in the lines. What I'm impressed with, and Tom, I'll put you on the spot, right? What there is, and you may not remember, but there is this rule, right, about 2 female characters talking to each other and not about a man. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, the Bechdel rule.
Yeah. This passes that very easily because the Keely and Rebecca quickly became one of my favorite relationships, where they have become really good friends.
Yeah, they do a really good job with that. I think the first time we really see them interact, it probably breaks the rule because they're talking about dating footballers.
Right.
But even the first time they see each other, it is very much a woman supporting woman because she's showing Rebecca how to stand.
Yes.
Which I thought was really, like, I just thought that was such a nice little moment. And there are so many that build on that, to the point that Rebecca doesn't have to be convinced that Keely is good at what she does. when she brings her in. Like, it just seems like a natural outgrowth, and not, we have this character, we don't know what to do, how are we going to fit them in? Like I mean, I'm sure it was planned, because like we said, Sorkin makes things look like everything was planned. And I think he's a lot more improvisational, where these guys very clearly know what they're doing. And I think you see that in their relationship, and it's just amazing how well those two characters support each other.
David, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think you specifically talk about Keely and Rebecca, which is a great relationship. But man, any interaction almost between any character becomes something that you're so interested in. Give
Yeah.
me Higgins and Rebecca. Give
Yes.
me Beard and Jane. Give me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who it is. For some reason, whenever whoever is taking center stage at that moment is just in it is so fun to watch. And a lot of times you'll be watching a show and you'll be bored by what you'll think is the B or C or D plot. And every time they switch here, it's like, ooh, what do we get to see now? And what's going to happen? And I just love it.
I'm apologizing in advance, David, because Tom and I have spent hours working comic booths together when he's working. And so a lot of these things that we have a history on, but one of the things that often in comic book movies or comic book series is the male lead and the female lead has to be the same thing. And for example, Tom, I'll put you on the spot. Your thought about like Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah,
like if you were doing this.
Yeah, making Sue Storm a scientist is boring because she's the third smartest member of that cast after Reed and Doom. Whereas if you made her a businesswoman, that's something neither of those guys are doing well, and that would be interesting. So kind of the same way, I like that everybody in Ted Lasso they have something they bring to the table, and it's not what the other people bring to the table. I mean, yeah. Lasso and Beard kind of overlap because they're both coaches, but at no point can Rebecca coach the team. And Ted isn't a marketing guy. And actually, Rebecca is not a marketing person. She needs Keely. And, everybody's got a thing that they do that only they can do.
Well, that's one thing about, like you just mentioned, Beard and Ted being so close. They're both coaches, but one of the things that I read was really how Ted, I guess, call him the leader, but he wouldn't be able to do it without Beard. Beard fills everything in, boasts him, builds him up, and that's really his responsibility. He wouldn't be able to take that lead like Ted, but Ted wouldn't be able to do it without him either. And so that's, to your point, I think that shows that relationship as well.
Yeah, you almost see Ted as the recruiter, big picture guy, and Beard the detailed kind of doing. And you see that when he goes, what do we got, coach? Oh, there's speed, a lot of speed,
A lot of speed.
Yeah, they're fast, and he is studying all the books on, European soccer.
His first introduction, he's sitting there and he's reading that book, the inverted pyramid or whatever it was. And yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I like that. Go ahead, Tom.
It's kind of a Star Trek thing where Beard Lasso's the captain, and he doesn't necessarily know how to execute everything he's trying to do, but he knows what he wants to do, and then it's Beard's job to make it happen.
Yeah, and I really love that, and I do love that. And once again, it seems like Keely is this social media influencer, and all of a sudden you find out she's really good at this and she's really smart. And now then they've, as we get into the second season, they've given her an official role, which is pretty slick. So let's move into the second season. I'd like us just to go around the table, maybe just a couple of sentences, your initial thoughts on the seasons, and we'll start with you, Tom.
I like it a lot. I was terrified about it because I wanted it to be awesome like the first season. The one thing, it feels uneven, but one of the things I read on Twitter from the guy who plays Coach Beard is that they thought they were going to drop all 3 episodes at once, and that makes a difference because by the end of the 3rd episode, it feels like the last one felt, and that's a high bar to achieve to have this perfect thing and then start doing it again.
David?
Yeah, I mean, just what Tom said. I mean, with the expectation that they thought that you were going to be able to see all three, because at first, you know, you're one of my favorite characters from season one is Nate the Great, and he's not so great in these first episodes. And in fact, on Twitter today, I put hashtag Make Nate Great Again to all Ted Lasso fans, and then it just happened right before this. I was looking on Twitter, and Nate Muhammad has obviously been getting some flack for the portrayal, and was like, I can't really say much, but just keep watching. And the first comment was from somebody was like, I love Nate in the first season, but I hate him now. And Bill Lawrence, one of the producers, was like, good, you're supposed to. So
Yeah.
that's pretty great.
Yeah, I felt like they've got off I felt right back at home. I liked, we're going to talk about Dr. Sharon and Nora, but I really like the idea of bringing in someone that's kind of immune to Ted's charms. And so I think that was an interesting discussion. So I've been very happy, a little sad because last time I was able to binge all in a row, and now then I'm having to do, every week.
Yeah.
But
Stuck like us schmucks that found it pretty soon, and that's one of those things. That's a thing that Twitter, you still see people every day that are posting like, I'm late to the party, or I just found it, or whatever. Man, it's one of those things where the bandwagon is not long enough. You're welcome at any time.
And huge Emmy nominations, all richly deserved, and it just does seem like that, they got lightning in a bottle. And I think Tom's point is like, I remember going to see the first Star Trek, the motion picture, and like, please be good, please be good. It was still Star Trek, and I was happy, but it wasn't like Star Trek 2 with the Wrath of Khan, like, oh my God, okay, this was what I was wanting. And so you are going, oh, please, there not be no software jinx, no software jinx. And instead, I think they really know their characters, and they know the story. And we're going to go, what we I thought we'd decide or kind of talk about characters, and Ted, Coach Beard, and Nate. And I agree. I do not like Nate, but I think it's an interesting character arc, that being the underdog, being the afterthought, and Ted has helped him rise. It is like a freshly recovering alcoholic, or someone who's lost a ton of weight, or reformed smoker. All of a sudden they can't resist telling about and talking about. And Nate is just horrible to the new kid guy.
Right.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I guess it's one of those things where I felt like even from the first moment when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's what this character arc is going to be. That's what's going to be this season. Because I mean, I get it from a storytelling standpoint. I understand it. I know obviously there needs to be a redemption arc, and God, I pray that there is. But also, I'm kind of sad that they had to go that way, because that seems like that's the one thing to me that on this show seems like a traditional trope. Whereas you always think that it's going to spin a different direction. Well, in this case, if it spins a different direction and there is no redemption, then I'm really going to be upset. So yes. I'm hoping that there is a redemption arc.
Yeah. Tom?
See, I think you're all wrong.
Okay.
Because Ted Lasso has been so good at delivering nuanced stories, I don't think this is the corruption or the failure of Nate. I think there is a stressor we don't know about yet. I don't know what it is, but I think it's something like and this isn't going to line up, I'm just using it as a for instance, that he knows how much financial trouble the team's in, and that's why he is being so aggressive to the kit man, and why he's being so overly concerned about. I just think that there's something that's happened that we don't know about, that's causing him to act this way, that when he does, it will make a lot more sense, and that it won't have been the proper reaction, but it will be a reaction that we will go, oh, now I see how he got there, rather than just him like being at the top of the mountain and treating people the way people treated him.
Right.
Oh, I like that twist. I would really like that a lot if that's the
Yeah.
case. Because I do think that would pay off well, and would also agree that they don't go the normal route, right? Like you, I know I was shocked when I saw that, the first season, Ted and his wife, and I really like that actress who played his wife, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, they're breaking up. And then she breaks your heart when she's like, I'm gonna get that feeling again. I pray every morning I'm gonna wake up and feel for you the way I used to, and your heart breaks for her and him. So, and that was a little bit different. So I like that about Nate a lot. I do thought it was a great line when Nate says, yeah, you don't want somebody in here undermining everyone and destroying morale. And Ted and Beard kind of look at each other like, oh, he doesn't realize this, does he?
Yeah, that was a good moment right there for sure.
Yeah. All right. So Ted seems to be a little more comfortable. So David, start about Ted. What's your thoughts on Ted in this second season?
You say he seems more comfortable, and I'm not certain about that. I think that interaction with Dr. Sharon and has kind of thrown him off his game, and he's joking about this streak of draws and how he's not bothered by it, but I think he wants to win, and I think that does bother him. And we can't assume, and I think no one does assume that he's really over that divorce and everything else. He's kind of shown some of that. So I think just looking at it, I think that his journey is still very much continuing, and we're not so far away from him, breaking down at the nightclub and having a panic attack. We're not that far away. And so I don't know any reason why we wouldn't potentially see another one of those.
Yeah, and when I said more comfortable, I felt as the coach in that role. I do believe that Dr. Sharon has really kind of upset the apple cart, so to speak. How about you, Tom? Thoughts on Ted?
Yeah, when the first episode started, it was kind of like the Fletch zippity doodah scene in Fletch 2. Like everything's going perfectly. Like they're not winning, but it's the exact environment in which all these characters want. And they've become comfortable, but they've also achieved a sort of homeostasis. And what we see, so he's comfortable then, and then Doc shows up and throws everything off. What I particularly like about what they're doing, though, is that Ted knows he's bothered by it. It's not Ted acting jealous and other people realizing it and Ted not. Ted is very, in conversations Jesse has heard me say about other things, like, I know this is affecting my decisions. I just can't tell how it's affecting my decisions. Like you can see that there is a thumb on the scale and he can see it, but he can't see his way clear through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting and very realistic take to take with Ted.
Yeah, he's self-aware. I'm sorry.
But go ahead, David.
He's self-aware enough to know, okay, I'm struggling with this, but he can't really understand why. He doesn't think it's jealousy. He doesn't think that it's that kind of instance, but maybe it is. Maybe it just hasn't all come through, but he's self-aware enough to know there's a problem, but I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do think, in my mind, it is a little bit to do with he talked about the therapist that, the marriage counselor they went to. And also I think, last season, both in the show and the football season, he fought so hard to get the team to be united. And now then that it is there, he's worried about anything upsetting it. But I think that was a great line when Dr. Sharon says, everyone seems to respect each other. Everyone seems to enjoy each other. And, and so Ted's like, oh, so it's one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And she goes, well, so many set ties, is that not broken? And I thought gave him the idea like, well, maybe I do need to shake things up. And then, we see Jamie coming back. Tom, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know that I like Dr. Sharon yet, but I don't think I'm supposed to. She is very much in a different show than everybody else is. It's like years ago, the first 13 episodes of Carolyn in the City. Every actor on that show thought they were on Frasier, and Leah Thompson was acting like she was on Gilligan's Island. And kind of the same way, like Dr. Sharon is very serious and very dry and not amused, and that's not the world these characters live in. So it's going to be interesting to see that bounce off each other. I think she's a good add to the team because it causes stress in all sorts of weird ways, and I think that it puts conflict in without necessarily doing it externally. Like they realize they have a problem and they're trying to fix it, and I like that we see her give, especially early on, where she says, you can call me Doc. Yeah. Where she doesn't have to win every fight. They're not making her superior to Ted. They're putting them both in a position where it feels like they're going to find some sort of mutual respect, or they're going to figure out how to work with each other.
Yeah, I loved her line about Prince of Tides, that's her favorite book, that she answers his question. And I thought that was interesting. And then just, Coach Beard, which, as they were quick to say, is that his nickname? Is that his last name? We don't know, and it's not important. I love his love life, and we got to see the chess player last year. This year, we aren't quite sure who he is, but I always think he is such a not only comedy relief, but this, in a lot of ways, just this even keel for Ted and the whole show. Truly, and considering he's one of the writers, I just think that's amazing. Any thoughts on Coach Beard?
I mean, when you talk about he's so steadfast, basically from there, but then you have him yelling at Ted that winning is important.
Yes.
You have him singing Lady Gaga for karaoke.
Yes. Yes.
You have him getting drunk and going crazy at the ball and starting the crazy dancing, and it just, so you can see that he shows the wilder side, and I love it. Those are, when those moments come out, it's pretty great. But or the time where he's talking about the kind you have to pay for, and Nate looks over at him and says, "You paid for that?" "No, I've been paid." And
yes,
I couldn't stop laughing at that. It was great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tom?
He's easily one of my favorite characters. I like that they deploy him tactically.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't have to be loud until you need him to be loud, but even still, it's not like, to analogize again, it's not like Worf on Next Generation, where everything was delivered in the same tone, which worked great for Worf. But he can be silly, and he can play along with Ted, and he can rein Ted in, but it's all like within a couple steps of each other, so that when you see him yell at Ted at the bar that winning is important, like, that's a giant moment. And they know when to do it, and they're doing it so sparingly that if they have to do it again, it's still going to have impact. Rather than, like, if he were like that more and more often, it would just lose that. I like how smart and how complicated and how weird he is. Just the idea that he plays that level of chess, or that he's the one who reads. Or still, one of my favorite parts from last season is where Ted comes in and he's all messed up, and Nate looks at Coach Beard and says, "Is he okay?" And he's like, "No, he's not."
Exactly.
Like, it's just this great delivery that it's it's broad, but it's still within that range of his.
Well, that's what I want to say is that, talk about the character all you want and how they write him and everything, but man, you've got to give so much credit to Brendan Hunt and how he plays it, and his delivery of those lines. Just like I was sitting here thinking that delivery of no, and it's just his face and the sound, and it just is absolutely perfect. And while I know it's a scripted show, and I know he knew what he needed to say, the delivery was spot on,
Mm-hmm.
Coach. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I also love that often he is the translator, um, because what was the line where Nate goes, "Was that a book or a movie?" And he goes, "Both." And he often is the one who has to explain something to him. Really, really great. So let's move on to Rebecca and Keely and Roy. And the reason I grouped them together is we had the very um, odd double date, that, and
Loved it.
Roy just kept going, "Another one. I need another one." Tom, let's start with you. Any thoughts about our three?
Roy Kent is my other favorite character. Also another one of the writers. I like that, right? Because I'm right about that, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand how you're that perfect in that role, because that seems like a really, really complicated role. Like, I know that the arts cross over, but I just can't imagine anyone else playing that. And he's another character that is really like, his range is a little broader because we get to see him with his niece, and we get to see him with Keely, and we get to see him with Rebecca. But when he has that burst that says, no, it should be like a bolt of lightning, cleaned up for PG audiences, he can have those bigger outbursts, but he can have them about interesting things. And I'm really interested in his arc, because I'm trying not to be writer boy on the show too much, because when you do that, you start deconstructing things. And like, it's not like I don't have actual problems with this season so far, but it's just, I would have thought that they would have made him a coach so they could keep him in the show, and to make him a pundit is a lot different and more interesting. And it's really interesting to see them dealing with the arc of somebody who's awesome at something, trying to find something to replace that. I don't think you see a lot of that, and I think it's a great arc.
Yeah, I agree with you. The easy thing would have been to make him a coach, but instead, and I love the payoff of how good he is, even though, salty language, and how happy he is when he comes back to it. David?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, the fact that he knew he was going to hate it. He was absolutely really just doing it to appease Keely, and then he goes and he does it, and he says exactly what he says, exactly what he thinks about the whole situation, and then that just turns out what it looks like appears to be very cathartic for him too, and puts him into a new place, and you're just so happy to see that. And then the relationship between I don't think I would have thought that the relationship between Keely and Rebecca would have translated to then Rebecca and Roy the way it has. He didn't seem to be kind of too excited to be going on the double date, but he didn't push back as hard as you would typically see in that situation, and he didn't really roll his eyes any more than this character normally would, because obviously that's the character. But then, like, when he runs into her in this most recent episode, where he runs into her outside of the doll store, and no, again, I think a lot of times a situation or a sitcom would play that like, oh gosh, now I've got to talk to this person, and that absolutely wasn't the case. They have a relationship too, and that's really really good to see.
Jane Epstein, Jane from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Espenson.
Yeah. She did a blog for a while about writing tips and everything. And one of the things she suggested, if you're working on a spec script, is to have two characters that don't normally interact, have them interact, because it will give you a fresh dynamic. This show does that very well. Like, you're in front of the doll shop,
well, it does it very well, and it does it often.
Yes.
You often see characters that you don't anticipate them having an interaction, then have an interaction.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that too.
Yeah. I loved Roy coaching his niece. I think the relationship with his niece is just absolutely adorable. I know you have a goddaughter, Tom, and I hope you are a little different when you visit with her, but
Yeah,
there
well,
is
I swear like Farscape with her.
yeah,
so it's safer.
exactly. But it just she adores him, and I think it's even nice that like the team mom just you got to be careful about calling them this even when they're acting like that. And then the whole okay, she made orange slices go, it just this grumpiness that he truly adores that niece though, and he's really proud of those girls.
Yeah, he's amazing. And you were saying about putting two characters together. There are no two characters in the show that I don't want to have a scene together. Like I can't, and the show is so good and did it so artfully in the first season where they took a giant locker room full of people and then slowly let you know who they all were past the ones that you immediately needed to know about.
Yeah.
Like they built it out with Sam and everybody else so naturally that, if Roy Kent starts hanging out with Rupert's wife, that'll be fine. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
She'll have depth I didn't expect, and it'll be brilliant.
Yeah.
Where you have, like, when you have last season, when you have Sam walking into Rebecca's office to ask her to join in because it's her team, and that wasn't something that I expected. And again, there's so many times when I started watching the show initially, I was like, okay, I'm ready for these tropes. I'm ready for, and that what I think, and I think the people that don't like it, don't understand that, or the ones who say that they are not going to watch it because it's just blah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's because they assume the same things that I think we all thought initially, but we gave it a chance and they have not. And I think once you give it a chance and you think, okay, well, I know where this is going, and then it 100% goes the other way. It's so fascinating, and bringing, like you said, those characters together and putting them all, you could throw them all and it's like, all right, well, pull a name out of a hat. We're going to have these characters interact now. Like,
you really could
at the karaoke, at the karaoke scene, and just to see stuff like that. But oh God, I love it.
Well, and you're right. Like you have it would have been easy for Rebecca's, boyfriend to be a bore, or someone who was, the closest they came to is him, talking about his loyalty between whichever team was winning, which is a common thing, and
name dropping. They could have played that up more, but they didn't. They
did that. So, and I like that payoff where he's fine.
Right.
He's fine, but why are you settling for fine?
Yeah.
Which was a nice little payoff to me.
Well, the fact that it came from Roy is so huge, because if Keeley says that, it's like, oh, it's girl talk, right? But when it comes from Roy, who has no skin in the game, really.
Yes.
That was so great.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Any other thoughts? I think we're going to have a financial worry. They've kind of set that up that, and I think a really good job of exposition, saying we were, on the very top level. I can't remember the different leagues, and now we're on the
Premier, and now they're championship.
Yeah, and so now that at championship, there's a less of a revenue stream, but they're still paying, and so they're going to do this. I do have a question, and then we're going to move to the other players. But you mentioned a couple things, Tom, that it's hard for you to turn your writer's hat off, and I want to hear those. But I had okay, why is Sam's dad so happy?
I am pointing
all the time when he's been wearing Dubai on his shirt. I mean, that seems inconsistent.
There were like 2 or 3 plot holes like that.
Yeah.
Where not plot holes, but just leaps of logic, just like that, and that's the problem.
Like, because Sam kept talking about how proud his dad is and how much good it is, but then when his dad says, "Oh, why would you support because they're owned?" I'm like, wait a minute, Why hasn't he been giving him a hard time about this all the time, Tom?
Yeah, so that there are two things that glitched on me over the first 3 episodes, and that was the biggest one. And especially for a show like Ted Lasso, where it's streaming, so if you need an extra minute, you can take an extra minute. The texts from his dad are bad, like they are insufficiently written, because he asks, "Do you know what they do?" And then, without waiting for a response, says, "I'm disappointed in you." I'm sure that you can draw a line between you're playing on a team supported by a subsidiary of Evil Corp, and it's different if you're the face of Evil Corp, because you have a connection to Nigeria that the other players don't have. And if he would have said that, that would have been fine. And also, I would have liked his father to be, you would have had to write it less judgmental, so that he's not immediately attacking his son and more, I mean, look, people are bad in text all the time, but not having met his dad, you would just expect there to be more of an escalation rather than go to, "I'm disappointed in you, you have brought dishonor to our family," kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas just saying, "Hey, do you know that they're doing this?" And then have it be a bigger thing, because everything that happens before that scene and after that scene, I have no problems with. It's just that transition it's not quite right.
David?
Well, so that right there, that transition there, like you said, Tom, there's a couple of things that just don't, there's leaps of logic, and there's things that you want to see, like going back an episode where Ted tells Jamie, "No, you're not coming back." And then all of a sudden he's back after he's told Sam. I want to see that scene where Lasso has to tell the Sam specifically and the team, "I've made this decision. He's coming back," and we don't get to see that. And that's
the other one.
Yeah, I feel. Go ahead, Tom.
And that scene is doubly weird because there's a time transition where it starts snowing, and it gives you the impression that lots of time has passed. And I can understand why you don't want to show the scene of Ted telling Sam that he's coming back. But what you need to have is a scene, and it was the scene I was hoping for in the 3rd episode, where Sam says, "When you told me he was coming back, I understood your reasons, but I didn't agree with them." Good. Right. Some scene like that, because I find it really hard to believe that the Ted who couldn't take Roy out of the starting lineup could violate that trust. Like, Ted would have told Sam it was happening.
Moments later, I mean,
right.
That cut was, "No, we're not bringing him back. Oh, here he is."
Right.
With no time.
Yeah, and that the look on Sam's face can either be, "You've betrayed me," or, "I think this is a bad idea and I've told you that," but we don't get to see which one it was. And right. I'm guessing it's the second, but I kind of need them to at least acknowledge it.
And I think as a viewer, my logic was, okay, he made that commitment. Then Dr. Sharon's like, "Oh, maybe we do need to shake things up," and then he goes, "All right," and then we have the surprise. I do not like it when for this, because it feels to me that this was just written this way, so you have the surprise cliffhanger ending of Jamie coming on the field, and I don't. Sometimes you get a good enough payoff, they're like, "Okay, I'm going to forget that because that one scene was so amazing. I want to see it." That wasn't that amazing of a scene. And I agree. I think you would have, we did have all the coaches voting on whether Jamie should come back or not. And I like the idea that Higgins is like, yes, as for, as the guy who's president of the club, yes, let's get another ace in here. I like that. But I do think, and especially as you talk about with Roy, not benching Roy, Ted would not do this to the team unless he's just totally, and Dr. Sharon is in his mind so much that she's just, he's doing weird things. And I don't think they earn that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it
I
feels
don't-
like there's a scene that maybe it was filmed
Yeah.
and it just didn't fit. I just
Yeah.
there's something missing, and I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. And it's in that second
Yeah.
episode. There's something missing, and maybe a flashback.
Yeah.
They haven't really utilized that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, but I mean maybe something like that.
Yeah, the second season cliffhanger or the second episode cliffhanger only works because it's a shock.
Yeah.
Because if you'd done a scene where Ted said, "I'm bringing him back," you're not going to have that emotional resonance, but you do have to backtrack and show that Ted was still Ted.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
And that would have been okay at the beginning of episode 3, like you said, Tom, and you
Mhm.
would have thought that would be the case. But even as Brendan Hunt said, if you had seen all 3 at the same time, if you had been able to binge the first 3 like they thought, even then you still don't get that.
No.
I mean,
Right.
I come back and I've watched the 3rd episode 3 times at this point, and I still don't get that.
Yeah.
That whatever it is, whatever scene is missing out of that second episode. There's one other thing that I have a problem with in episode 3 about this whole, all right, we're going to put this tape over this and that's all great. You mean to tell me that there are no coaches in the locker room before the game? None. No
Yeah.
one saw this coming.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. What? Like, no.
Yeah, well, it is similar to the sitcom Coach, right? They tend to downplay the amount of coaches that would be on a professional soccer team. But yes, I think that is a fair, kind of nitpick that you have to hand wave.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would have liked to have seen somebody run up to Rebecca before they take the field, even if we don't hear what they say, because Rebecca's response to Sam is pretty loving.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't do the what did I call him on Twitter today? Schnate Nelly.
Mhm.
They don't do the Nate, like you're getting paid, you'll promote what we want.
Yeah.
It seemed like she gave him that respect. If they're going to do this, they would probably have given her a heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do forgive a little bit because we get the great scene with Jamie and them bonding at the end, so
Yeah.
and I do think these 3 episodes work really well as a trilogy to reset. I'm really glad Sam has more screen time. I thought he had some great gems in the first season where he talked about, well, when he refused the army man, I have a different context of the U.S. military, and and the whole be a goldfish. So I was glad to see him have a little more screen time and a bigger character. I also, who's the guy that's Dutch? I didn't
Jan.
get. Yeah.
Jan.
Yeah, but I love that. It's because he's Dutch. That's just
Yeah.
I'm blunt because of that.
He's not being mean. He's
Yeah,
just
he should be.
Dutch.
Yeah, and and I thought that Danny's crisis in the first episode was funny, yet at the same time, you could tell it was he played that really well.
Yeah.
So.
Mhm.
Football
Yeah.
is death.
Yeah, football is death. And so any other thoughts of storylines? Chris, my son, said, okay, after the second season, like in the middle of the second episode, he's like, am I supposed to feel sorry for Jamie now? Like, I'm supposed to feel sorry for Jamie freaking Tart,
Yeah.
So I think it was a clever way to get him back on the team,
Mhm.
to have him not being welcomed anywhere else and kind of going. So we'll see what happens. But any other player comments or scenes you want to share?
Yeah, 2. The first is in season 1 when Isaac becomes the captain and they look over at him and say, all right, Captain, count us in. It's Richmond on 12.
Yes.
That is my absolute favorite thing. And then when he skips 8,
Yes.
I swear I would love to know if that was written or not, because with the way that it was filmed, you can see Ted Lasso look over like, what?
Yes.
And I don't know whether that was planned, but man, that is a family favorite right there. And it's always
Mhm.
Richmond on 12.
Yeah.
And we do that. And then O'Brien tore his butt. I don't know why, but and the callback in this episode, what, O'Brien, your butt's still torn?
Yes.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Good. Tom, anything?
I think I'd like to see a little more Isaac, because he is a team
Yeah.
captain. I think there are lots of places where I get why they did it with Sam, because we like Sam more.
Mhm.
But Isaac should have more to say about what's going on, and I'm sure he does. It's just we're not seeing it. And some of it is how much screen time you want to give everybody else. But he's captain of the team. I need to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I think well said.
You've got some players like you've got Colin, you've got Zorro, you've got um, Jan now,
Yeah.
and things, and so there's these characters, these same guys that they brought back, and then this one new guy, and I mean just the fact that most of these character actors are all back, and it just these background guys, so great. At least the consistency there was worth it.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
thought it's really well done. And I love that, the bar. We've got,
Oh,
the owner,
May
May, and then the
May is the
three,
best.
May is great. And then, the three super fans, that were just, and the scene, oh, look, I take it so they're in my hands,
Yeah. No, they're great, and the bar scenes are fantastic, and even like
Mhm.
when they're always berating Ted, and then like you were mentioning his wife, and they walk in
Yeah.
and just like, oh, Coach's wife, she's seen it all.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
just
great.
really well done. All right, let's talk about some of the new characters. So, Tom, you mentioned you aren't sure on Dr. Sharon yet, if we're supposed to like her. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, she doesn't blend yet, and I don't. It did seem like they brought her in to be a sports psychiatrist really fast, especially for a team that has less money. It seems odd to make another hire like that. I think she's going to be ultimately. I think she's going to be interesting, and also those first episodes of Ted Lasso, or the first 10 episodes of Ted Lasso, give me a lot of leeway on what you're doing, because it's like watching Pixar films. You're gonna do something about a jazz player. Well, everything else has been awesome. Why should I worry about it?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for them to make a serious mistake. I don't want them to, but because of that, it does let me turn a few things off and go, okay, I don't get it. I don't know where this is going. I'll probably like it when I get there.
Okay, good. David?
Yeah, I mean with Dr. Sharon, like when Ted tries to bring her the biscuits, and she's like, I don't eat sugar and things, and you're just like, what's happening? And it's tense, but I do enjoy it too, because it seems real. There's not everyone is going to fall for his charm. Not everyone is going to be roped in. Obviously, his wife got tired of it. Whatever other flaws he may have, it doesn't sound like it's not because he's a great lover, because Sassy has now explained that to us
Yes.
in detail.
He's very eager. Yes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like I said, just there's something there, but having her as this foil, as this counterpoint, the thing that I'm most intrigued to see is, okay, she's not falling for his charm essentially, but she's starting to, because she did say, you can call me doctor or doc,
Yes.
and things like that. So she's starting to do that. But I think what's going to be most important, I mean, especially over these next however many however we have left, is it 7 or 9? I can't remember if it was 10 or 12 for this season.
I think it's 12, so it should
I
be
think it
down.
is too.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm curious to see then is his arc, because like I said, he's still got some dark stuff going on in there. He
Mhm.
talked about, like when he was talking with Jamie, I think he was talking with Jamie about, how his dad was harder on himself than he was on him. There's something there too. I want to see that explored, and I think that that's really what Sharon is going to be able to provide. Is that just something different than what Coach Beard or Rebecca would be able to do? I think Sharon is going to be able to say something different. One character that we haven't seen in these first 3 episodes that I'm curious is Rupert, because there's a baby coming. I want this episode. Where's this baby? I want to see this baby that was such a shock to Rebecca.
Yeah.
In the end of last season.
Yeah. And go ahead, Tom.
I think I'd like to, but I'm not sure, because I feel like Rupert would start to be reformed in a second season, and I'm okay with him being the bad guy.
Yeah.
He
just continues on that bad path, and that's okay too.
Yeah, but I'm okay with him being bad around adults. If he's bad around a baby, that it becomes a whole different level of evil.
He could be a loving father and still be just a big jerk to Rebecca and the rest of the team. So
I really like they paid off bringing in Nora. We talked a little bit before you joined us, Tom. Before we started recording, is that Chris was, oh great, the surly teenager, and then he immediately went, oh wow, she ended up being a really interesting character. I think it's really nice the payoff, because when Sassy talked about, look, you have to own part of this, that you left your my daughter, your goddaughter, thinking she had done something wrong. And I think that's interesting, them trying to get it to get, good together, her taking her for tea and realizing, okay, everyone's, 6 or 7, and what am I doing with this teenager? I just thought that was a really nice scene, and I really loved the character. Tom?
Yeah, they're doing a really good job writing her as a kid, but a smart kid.
Yes.
And a nice kid. Like, she's not mean to Rebecca when she takes her for tea.
Yeah.
Like, she sees what's happening, but it's kind of boring. And, doesn't need the doll. But also, she's so starstruck by Sam, which is just such a, that reaction is so on point for that age group, that I think it's just so charming to see. And that Rebecca knows that she's embarrassed by it, but knows that she really wants to do it and will push her over it. And I mean, the weirdest part of the whole story, honestly, is that Roy Kent had the best, essentially, anting advice that Rebecca took to heart. And it's like, I like seeing her try, and I like seeing Nora respond to it. Like, it doesn't feel like it's an adversarial relationship. They're just trying to smooth over some bumps, and it's a much more natural, realistic relationship, but that's not necessarily what you see on TV all the time.
Yeah.
For
David?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And to see, the little dig that she does get in at the tea shop, where she was like, all right, I'm gonna go pay the bill. You're coming back though, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Why do you ask? Well, because I just didn't know if you were going to leave for 6 years again.
Yes.
And I was like, all right, there's your shot. And and then that was really the kind of end to that. And she said what she needed to say. Now she moved on, and then you see them bond, and they're in bed together writing this email to the owner of Cerithium Oil. Which, touch on that for a second. Do you guys get that part? I didn't immediately. I had to read it. But do you get why that's so clever and funny?
No, please tell me. I don't.
So Shell Oil is a big player in ruining Nigeria and other lands for that. And Cerithium is a shell.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
That's how it all came back. Yeah.
That's
and so
very clever.
That's how they can have that on point social commentary and do it in that way. It was pretty brilliant, but I didn't catch it when I first read it. I was like, something is not right. And then I read it and I was like, oh, that's brilliant.
That is greatness. So, I also love, it's a minor thing, but the whole Britain, we do orphan dolls really badly,
Yeah.
right? Like that
Yeah.
was just the kind of, once again, just the thrown off there.
She's from the New Line. She was canceled. Her parents were canceled.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Yeah.
That was great.
And I also love the fact that Roy is friends with this yoga group, and that,
Yeah,
that was a
yoga
great way
moms.
to show that, he's just drinking the wine and seeing, the reality TV. And, I think that's just the added depth of him, right?
Mhm.
I think like I said, I just rewatched episode 3 for the third time, and there was something that it didn't strike me in the first viewing, but on the second viewing I really laughed out loud, and then the third viewing I just cackled. But there's a moment when Jamie is apologizing to the team, and then he's like, does anyone have anything to say? And there were two moments. One where the Cumberbatch kid goes, "You hit on my, you hit on my mom in front of my dad," and he goes, "Yeah, I'm very sorry. Tell your dad I'm very sorry, and say hi to Janet for me, or give my best to Janet."
Yes. Yes.
And I laughed so hard at that. It was so great. And then he says, "Is there anyone else?" And they all start screaming at him. And John Jan goes, "I don't know you, but I don't like you."
Yeah. And the guy in French, right? And like, well, it
Yeah.
sounded better in French. Yes,
Yeah, it
it's
sounded
good.
better in French.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Any other thoughts over the first 3 episodes? Anything you want to share? Anything that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I really like the Jamie Tart redemption story, because I
Yeah.
like that he's doing everything like Jamie Tart.
Yes.
He knows what he has to do. He's just doing it like Jamie Tart does it. And that's not what he needs to do, but it's not that he's dense to what's going on. It's that he doesn't know how to do the thing the way normal people or these people should be doing it. And 2, let me throw my hat in the ring right now. I will totally write the Sassy spinoff, because I love that character.
Oh, I love that character too.
She reminds me of when Celia Ward showed up on House.
Mm-hmm.
Because with House was playing a different game than everybody else, and he's smarter and cleverer. And then when you see Celia Ward show up, you're like, oh crap, you can keep up with him.
Yeah.
Like and the two of them, when they met in the hotel, are just perfect, and that hasn't gone away. Like, I want to see. They don't need to, but I would be fine seeing more of that relationship, because I like that character. I like that actress. I like the way she delivers her lines. I like the lines they give her. It's just a delight.
Yeah, she is very, very likable, very sexy, and I also love the fact that the 3 of them together, Rebecca, Keely, and Sassy, right? There was no. They immediately bonded. They're friends, and it was good. So yeah, I like that. Good.
Also, by the way, I like that there's no secret about Sassy and Ted.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't gonna be a bomb in the relationship. It's like right out there in the open.
All right, but keep that. But so go back to what is it? Episode 8 or 7 or 8, whatever they 8 Diamond Dogs, and the issue is that he asked the Diamond Dogs, should I tell Rebecca? And they're like, no. And so you never see that said, and then you don't know whether it is when he walks in, but obviously that's already been discussed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that's another scene. It's one of those things where I wish I had seen that. I wish I had seen how that happened. Who said it? Was it Ted to Rebecca? Was it Sassy to Rebecca? How did that play out?
It's also another very clever where they kept it PG, but it was just on the edge where, is she my daughter? Look, and if I remember correctly, they stop, you finished on.
Exactly.
Exactly. That was very interesting. All right. Any final thoughts? We'll start with you, David.
I like I said, it was probably 5 minutes into, I guess it was probably 10 minutes into that first episode of the first season, the comment about he goes into Rebecca's office, and any kind of chino. Well, how do you take your tea? Normally I take it right back to the counter because something has gone horribly wrong. That is the moment where I realized that I love this show, and I that's where I was cackling and rewinding like 3 or 4 times. That was the moment that hooked me, and I haven't stopped since. And so I just hope that this continues, and I'm looking forward to getting together and talking about this again, because I love this show so much. I could talk for hours about each episode and some of the line deliveries, and I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'll get to you just in a minute, Tom. What I was thinking about when Jamie brings the little army man and says, "I named him Ted after Ted Danson," and they talk about, oh yeah, just a quick thing about he's had a Cheers and The Good Place, and and all this, and like this little banter that truly does not move the story far ahead at all. It's just a little riff that's just entertaining.
Yeah.
And I just love, I hope they continue to do that. I think they will. That's part of the style of the show, but it's just really that's a little gem, which is very Aaron Sorkin-ish.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how that will play when I rewatch the episodes more.
Yeah.
Because I think in the first episode, I felt like they were doing that a little too much.
Okay.
But it may just be that was front loaded into what essentially should have been a 90-minute episode, and I wouldn't have noticed it otherwise. Because coming back from that season, I was super observant of everything and worried about everything, and what are you going to do wrong and what are you going to do right. It's interesting, David, what you talk about the scene that hooked you, because the tea scene for me plays much better on a rewatch, because it's one of the few times you see Ted express negative emotions about something, and he still does it very Ted-like, but it's one of the places he's like, no, this is bad, no, you should not have this. The scene that actually sold me on the show, and I'll try to keep it PG too, is when he's talking to Healy and he says, how do you motivate Jamie?
Yes.
Because his response to her answer is not, well, that's not going to work. He doesn't bat her away. He basically does like the improv yes and he's like, we're gonna have to find something else, but he's not telling her her response is bad. He's building on that to give a better response. And that's when you really see him as a manager.
That happens so often, like where you would think it would be this, the response would be this in real life, but then it's this, and that's how you want it to happen. And I got to be honest, I have found myself trying to, in my real life, in my interactions at work, etc., try to respond in a different way, and that has helped me. I have to admit,
I keep pointing to the dart scene from the first season, because the entire be curious, not judgmental, I think I think Ted Lasso is a perfect storm, because I don't know if there weren't a pandemic, if people would have found it the way that they did. And I don't think they would have been ready for it the way that, like, I don't think people realize they needed a Ted Lasso.
Right.
They needed something that effectively was like, a Mr. Rogers or, a Tom Hanks TV series or something, something like that. And I just I'm amazed by that thought. And it just applies to so many things where there's just too many people just assuming things and not listening to other people, when you can, it's the message that the world needs in a way that I didn't think it expected.
I totally agree with that. And for me, I was liking the show a lot, but I became in love with the show when Trent writes the article about Ted. And when he says, they will be relegated. Relegated, but I won't be happy about it. And you this guy truly does care about this. And we get a great payoff later when Coach is like, these are professionals. You do have to care about winning. But I love that.
Well, the one thing that I would say, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to make my prediction because I want this on the record.
Okay.
In season 2, you will have guest appearance by Alfonso Ribeiro.
Okay.
Because there's in watching season 1 again, there's way too much reference to the Carlton. I feel like he needs to be in it somewhere.
I never know how to respond when a grown man does the Carlton in front of me.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love that. All right.
Agree.
David, have
I
you
would
got any
say-
predictions?
Predictions. Yeah, I think we're going to see Rupert return. I think you can't have that character. Plus the actor is so great, and
He is so amazing.
Yeah, I mean you want him back, and so I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see the continuation of this darkness that this obviously this lead tasso is in there, and I think that is going to be explored potentially more, and we'll have to see how Dr. Sharon kind of handles that. I did want to say that, from the media standpoint, what we've seen is everyone talks about, to Tom's point, and is how wholesome it seems to be, or we weren't all ready for that. But I say that, and my favorite character is Roy Kent, who
Yes.
every other word is an F-bomb.
Yes.
And I love it. And
Yes.
that's the thing. It's like we all talk about how it's the Mr. Rogers, but it is the 21st century version of Mr. Rogers where we get to have those F-bombs. And I really love that.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights was more than about football, and I say Ted Lasso was more than about a fish out of water, and an American coach coaching European soccer. It's just really something special. And my hope is, I'm going to predict that they will start winning, and they will go up to the next league. I think that will be the storyline for the third season, but we will see. If someone wants to reach you, David, how can they?
I'm on Instagram and on Twitter at Blind Nello.
Okay. And Tom, you mentioned you're a writer and an artist. Tell us how we could find some of your fine work.
Well, as somebody whose car just died, let me tell you that you can go to patreon.com/Thom Zahler and read new issues or new pages of Love and Capes every week, along with a bunch of other stuff. You can also find me on Twitter at Thom Zahler, Instagram at Thom Zahler, and ThomZ.com, THOMZ.com. That's got all my stuff. You can read. I write a lot of romantic comedies. I write stuff that aspires to be Ted Lasso, so it won't fill those 6 days in between, but it might distract you from that.
And I will give a shout out. Tom took COVID and has done a Love and Capes. Is COVID is happening in their world, and he has made it entertaining. And also has spoken a lot of things we're all frustrated about. So I recommend strongly check out his Patreon. I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. You can hear me talk to fans of Bruce Springsteen from around the world on Set Listing Bruce. We are coming up in September, will be our 6th anniversary. I did not ask Tom to do a new logo. He did a great 5th anniversary logo. So please check that out. For now, we'll be back in about 3 weeks. I think that's a nice little, we'll do 3 at a time, and we'll do that. But Tom, David, thank you so much. I cannot think of more enjoyable people to spend an hour and a half talking about one of my favorite shows.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
All right, listeners, please go get vaccinated. Stay safe, wear a mask. Let's all get through this so we can do this together. And for now, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
And we're on in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2.
What a match. Manchester United beat Chelsea 1-0 in a result that drops Chelsea out of the European places and lands United in the top 3 for now. Chris, was this a case where United won the match or that Chelsea lost it?
United just had that extra sharpness in the final third. But I thought both teams played really well.
George?
A real even battle. It's football at its finest.
Roy Kent, ex-Chelsea legend, joins us. Welcome, Roy. Right, what did you think? Did your former club play well?
No, I thought they played like shit.
Our apologies to the viewing audience. Roy Kent with some salty language. Would you care to elaborate, Roy?
All right. Chelsea was shit today. It was shocking. Watching them, you'd never know they were playing at home. They were too timid. They were too respectful of United. They were lucky they didn't lose by 3 or 4 or 10.
That's harsh, Roy. United's been on a good run recently.
Who gives a shit, Chris? That's no excuse to play like you're afraid of them. You could see it in their faces. Abject terror, like children waiting in line for their handsy Father Christmas. Have some f***ing pride in your shirt or don't f***ing wear it.
Why can't you fucking legend? I mean, that is how you do it.
I enjoy his candor. Again, we apologise for almost every word Roy just said.